me home for about 2 weeks. During that time, I became really sick. My hair started falling out in that picture you saw. That was that was about a week or so before I actually went back in the hospital. My hair just started clumping and coming out, and I couldn't brush it. It was just mangled together.
Yeah.
And so one of my high school friends, Kathy Snyder, has a beauty shop, and she took me to her shop and buzzed my head rather.
Okay.
And the day before, I actually went back in the hospital in February, the first week in February, to actually start over again. So I go back in the hospital that day after that, was February the 7th, I believe it was, and started over. I had to have that massive chemo again, 5 days of it, but not the total body radiation, so that was over. And so at that point, I was able to continue with the stem cell transplant, and I did all that. And thought it was going to be okay. I mean, I was very sick, to say the least, but I thought it was something I had to go through to get better. And so I did. You know, I never thought about that this wasn't going to work, that I was going to die or anything. I never thought about that. I never worried about it. Actually, what I did is I prayed before I went in. I put my little lapel on my nursing lapel when I was working. I had a little... What is that little button thing you put on you know?
Sure.
You
like
put
a lapel pin.
Lapel pin,
right,
yeah. Thanks. And I pinned that to my Bible, and I went in and I said, I'm going to have the faith of mustard seed to get through this. I took that mustard seed. It's still on my Bible to this day.
All right, Ricky, Gracie, thank you for being in the studio with me. I really appreciate you guys making the trip out, and I have been looking very forward to this conversation and hearing more about your story. I have some awareness of your story, but I want to hear more about it, both of your stories. And I think, though, we need to talk about, before we kind of dig into that story, you've got a why behind your why. You've got 3 girls, and how old are they now?
Actually, 15, 13, and 10.
15, 13, and 10. Okay. And now, are these your children? Were they...
They're our biological great-grandchildren.
Biological great-grandchildren. So like it's very common in our world today. There's like grandparents raising grandkids, but you guys are great-grandparents raising great-grandkids, right?
Right.
And... so that right there either is going to make you old or keep you young, right?
It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my 5th. Those 3 plus 2 more I've adopted in my life. So I never dreamed I'd ever. If I'd have been 21, somebody told me what my life was going to be like, I would have probably committed suicide.
Yeah. And
no, seriously, it's been great, though.
And I know it's unkind to ask, well, not maybe so much for a man, but for women, but what your age today is.
Oh, I'll be 80 in about 3 months.
You'll be 80, raising a 15-year-old, and and
I'm 74, just turned 74 in October, and I enjoy every minute of it. And, I haven't regretted it at all.
Well,
ever,
listen,
ever.
I think there's a special place in heaven for you guys, and there's always stories behind that, but I mean, giving kids a stable place to grow up and love, and I don't think they ever are wishing you guys were like, 79 and 29 and 24, right? They're probably not needing that, right?
I think it's better to be older.
Yeah.
Because you got more wisdom, that you can share with them. When you're raising kids, you are a kid in a sense,
Yeah.
But now we see things in a different light. So
yeah. Well, I grew up. You don't know this about me, but I grew up. My parents were older. My dad was 43, and my mom was just turned 42 right after I was born.
okay.
So I was the youngest of 7. So in a way, like I was growing up with parents that were like other people's grandparent age,
right.
By the time I was into middle school and high school. So, man, I thought it was a huge advantage, and probably for what you're talking about, like their perspective of life. Like I have my oldest sister is 22 years older than me, and she and I grew up with different parents, right? They were the same people, but they were different, right? Yeah. So anyway, but we're all blessed, man. I'm telling you, we are. But thank you for that, and I appreciate that you do that. And that's not the main topic we're here to talk about, but I just wanted to let you know I've always admired it when I kind of knew that you were doing that. But look, you've had some decades to have some life, right? And you've had some life experiences. And, we met, I caught up with you guys, and I'm thankful to be in a business networking group officially with you. And then, kind of by proxy, I'm in the networking group with you, right? We're in the same Liberty Networking organization. You're in one chapter and you're in my chapter. And, it is difficult for anyone to spend any amount of time with you guys and not be just absolutely fascinated by your story. And I want to get into the specifics, but what I'd love to do is, can we start with you and talk about like your background in the military and what you're into and what your military service, which of course, thank you for that. Okay. But kind of talk through sort of the history of that and how you got into the military and what that ended up meaning for you.
Okay. Well, basically, starting out as a child, I've always wanted to be a cowboy. My grandfather was born in 1886, so he was a great influence on me. So I guess the closest thing I could get to was military. So when I graduated from high school in 1964, I worked for a few months and then decided to go into the military, and that was when Vietnam was, cranking up. So and I was the only child. Mother was trying to discourage me, and I just wouldn't listen. I said, I've got to go. My friends are going. So I joined rather than being drafted, so I could pick, what I wanted to do in service. And so my dad encouraged me to go to electronics. So I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, and then I ended up in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, which was actually like an electronics place with audio, visual, and they had crypto, which is what we use, for coding. So it was a big facility for that.
So like, let me ask before you get, like, what would a crypto device have looked like? Like, how big was it? What kind of crypto devices were they?
I really never got. It was so secret. I had to have a top secret clearance anyway. Yeah. But I never was affiliated with crypto, but I was a repairman, not for crypto, but for radios. Okay. And that was, what I wanted to do to begin with. But it ended up to make it kind of fell through because after I went through school, I graduated, and they asked me to stay to be an instructor because I excelled in it, and I should have stayed there. And I said, no, I'll join the Army to see the world. So stupid me. I ended up in Vietnam. Yeah. But after that, I went to 4th Infantry Division in Fort Lewis, Washington, and they were preparing to go to Vietnam. Yeah. So I saw the handwriting on the wall. Yeah. The guys were shipping out old guys and bringing in new ones. Yep. I said, I don't want to go with them. So I volunteered. Yeah. So I ended up at MACV headquarters in Vietnam a few months after that, and I didn't have they didn't have a place for me.
So what do you remember that day when you got there?
Oh, yes, I do.
Talk about that day. Like, what was that day?
It was in
the
middle of the night when we landed at Tonsanoo Air Base. Yeah. And it's right just north of Saigon. And so they put us on, and you hear these stories. I was literally on a cattle truck. We're all standing up, with the sides on the trailers. And as we were riding down the road, I see these people with these big round hats on, and they look like they and it was a night, and they call them coolies, but they look like evening gowns, and I'm thinking, where in the world are these girls going, with evening gowns on? But, later on you find out it's just, the way the garb was that they used in Vietnam. But I remember the night. The impressive night was the night I left, though. Okay. But which was they were mortaring the runways, and we had machine gun escorts to get out. The plane landed. They cut the landing lights on. They were keeping 5 flares in the air. That's what I was counting, was watching this get to the airfield. And they landed the plane, and we went to the end of the runway, just turned the plane around, opened the back tailgate, and we just loaded in. They shut the gate, and off we went with mortars popping everywhere. And everybody was holding their breath, we were afraid the plane was going to get hit or they're going to knock a hole in the runway. So
were any planes getting hit on that day?
It was... The whole compound was getting mortared as we left there. Yeah. So it was a great send-off.
Yeah. Right.
Needless to say.
Yeah.
But we flew to Japan, refueled, and came back to Travis Air Force Base in California. But I while I was there, I was you call her an MOS, your job title. Well, they didn't have one for me. So when I was in the 4th Infantry Division, right before I left, they decided that since I didn't have the job title, wasn't there, to the facilities to use my expertise.
Right.
So they decided to cross-train me. So I ended up in a audio and pictorial company and a signal company, and I cross-trained in photos, taking photography and a photo lab. And so that's what I did when I went to Vietnam.
So was the idea that you were doing it like a journalist, or was it more like military historian? What was the purpose of you doing the media stuff?
Okay, it entailed going out. What happened, I ended up north of Saigon, about 300 miles north of Saigon, and they had like 10-man teams. And what they did, you had a still man, a motion man, and that went out, and they sent you to different places, and you were a combat photographer.
Okay.
But we cross-trained for the reason is people were always rotating in and out.
Right.
So we had to have someone cover our job. So we all did the same thing. We went out in the field. We covered, combat situations. And we had a perimeter of about 300 miles, I think, we covered. And I spent time with the South Korean Rock Marines, with Australian troops. And they would send me these places, and I'd go in combat with them and do these photos, and document. And basically that's what I did. I documented the war, and then I would come back and go to the lab, and I would develop my own film, do all the printing, do all my caption, and then put them in a satchel, and I would hand carry them to Saigon to MACV headquarters, and from there they sent them to Pentagon.
So they were
and we also did work for the CIA.
Yeah,
that's why we had.
So some of that was capturing the moment, but it sounds like it might have been used also for a bit of reconnaissance as well.
That in fact we did a lot that you don't. A lot of suicides in service.
Okay.
That you never hear about. So so we had to cover all that. We had to go do the photos and try to get all the names, all the information.
So that was a lot of American soldiers, or
a lot.
Yeah,
it was a very common thing. It was, in fact, it could have. We rotated, but one guy could have done one every week easily.
Yeah.
And in fact, we had a guy right next to us that committed suicide.
And you had to document that.
Oh yes.
And then you had to develop that.
Yes, and then hand carry it to Saigon.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was a lot of strain. And those things that you see that in fact, I'm hesitant to say this, but I saw an accident, and it was because of our government. And there was over 3,000 people killed at one time.
Yeah.
And I'm satisfied. They perimetered it off. So, but I had to cover all that.
Yeah, meaning it wasn't a deliberate act, but it's like a medical malpractice, right? Something that happens in the surgery table. It was happening
but they still didn't want anybody be aware of it.
Yeah.
And I can Google a spot where they just dug holes and buried the folks there. And I know exactly where they are. But there was a lot of women and children, and that's what really bothered me, I think, a great deal.
Sure.
I got used to the adults, but I never could get used to seeing, dead children.
I bet.
And it still bothers. I can still see their faces. I think that's one reason why I'm so attached to children now.
Yeah.
They're so innocent, and me, 19 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, you were young.
So, yeah, I can still cry.
Well, I can only imagine. I mean, the impression that would leave, and I think that no matter what you would do to prepare for war, I mean, how do you prepare your heart and mind for that kind of, human devastation?
I never
right?
dreamed.
Yeah.
Never dreamed I'd see anything like that my whole life.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is that there are a lot of people probably like you that have those memories they're carrying around, and the things that they didn't expect to. When you were 15, you weren't thinking that's what you were going to see in 4 years, right?
No.
Well, and I know when we kind of had the idea of filming, I didn't want you to have to say anything that you don't want to say or any of that. But these were real experiences from your life.
It is, and there's a lot I don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
But and I had a hard time over there. But I made it home. A lot of guys didn't.
Right.
And I have friends. That we share moments together every year.
Yeah.
So. Just like a little memorial, but I'm just thankful to God that I'm still here. Cause
no kidding.
You never know.
You don't.
I could have been over there buried somewhere, so I never miss it.
What we've kind of shined a light on is that there were some things that you saw, and you were responsible for documenting those, not just like the experience of seeing them, but you had to see them and capture them, and then
Right.
When you were out, was it also you think about war, and I think about if I was in combat, you'd always be with the idea like you could die right now, like were you carrying that kind of like everywhere you went you didn't know what was going to happen, or was it more about like just the experience of what you were seeing, and were you seeing kind of aftermath? Were you in the middle of the battles? And
I can remember the first time I got shot at.
Okay.
We had a compound. We had a sniper next to a rubber tree plantation, and he would come out and fire at anybody that came out of the compound. And we couldn't find him, so they ended up defoliaging the rubber tree plantation because we couldn't find him. So he disappeared. Because we could have found him then.
Right.
But I saw combat. I was in a plane crash, and I hurt my back, and. And actually, to make a funny little story, I had a friend of mine that had been there several years, and that's when you go into combat, you find somebody that's already been there, for a while, if you're smart,
right?
To teach you, what you should do and not do. But anyway, I had made a courier run to Saigon, and after you do your courier run, you usually have to wait 2 or 3 days to get a plane back to where you go, and you just go sit in the air base in a little shack waiting,
right?
On a manifest, and so after a certain time they cut you time off, and because it didn't fly. So I would end up going to Saigon. I had civilian clothes, so I and my friend, he just happened to show up. So we go to Saigon and we go downtown, and being a GI, they got bars, so we go to the bars. Well, it was getting close to curfew, and we decided to come back. Well, my friend had already been there about 3 years prior to me getting there, so he knew every street in Saigon,
right,
the ways back. So we get in the cab and we're going back to Tant Son Nhut, and he tells the driver, "D Tant Son Nhut, go to Tant Son Nhut." So he says, "Rick, this guy's not taking us to Tant Son Nhut." And it scared me. He said, "I am serious. We're not going to Tant Son Nhut. We're going out in the boondocks."
Yeah.
And I'd already knew. I'd been in Saigon several times, so I knew the path you go back to,
right,
through the villages.
And you were not on that path.
No, there were no villages. It was getting dark. We're getting in the jungle. So I'm not going to tell you how we got back, but I'm going to tell you we ended up taking this cab and we went back.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
So
you did what you had to do to get out of that situation.
But in essence, if we hadn't known any better, I may not have been here today.
Yeah.
But God had His hand on me.
Yeah.
So I thank Him for that. Because scary moment.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that a little bit. Like, you're 19 years old. Did you grow up with faith and were exposed to faith traditions? And
no,
so when you weren't really kind of thinking about sort of a higher purpose or this connection, and you weren't thinking about that at that time.
Not at all. It never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
It really didn't.
Yeah.
I knew they had chapel services, but I just that wasn't really interested.
It wasn't part of your life, and
and you didn't see a lot of chapel services, and I traveled a lot. I did a lot of flying, so I stayed busy all the time, actually I just didn't have time.
Yeah.
And Sunday and Monday wasn't there,
Right.
It was just every day.
It all blended together.
Right.
Yeah.
And you asked something, you cope with things like that. You wonder how people cope. And what happens was, and I ended up in a psychiatric ward in Asheville, North Carolina. And I asked the psychiatrist, I said, what happened to me? Because I'm not the person I was when I left.
And how old were you at that point when this happened?
When I went to the psychiatric ward in Asheville?
Right.
Probably in my late 20s.
Okay. So you'd been back for a bit of time.
I'd been back. Yeah.
Okay.
But I changed, and I was always real meek. I was the only child, so, I was kind of tied to mama's apron string. And then when I got over there, when you start facing, or you realize you can die any day, you have a change, and I didn't understand why. I thought it was just me, and then I find out that it's not me. The psychiatrist says you have a chemical change.
Yeah, everything changes inside.
And he says, and it never goes back. You just deal with it, and the best way you can. So that's what I did. And nobody ever explained to me when I came back. I couldn't understand, you know. My wife said I was the guy that invented road rage, I stayed ill all the time and angry. I had no emotions. All my tears dried up. I couldn't, until I was 32 years old, I couldn't cry.
Yeah.
I was just, dead inside.
Sure.
And then I got saved.
Yeah.
And God gave me my tears back.
And that was when you were in your 30s?
Yep, 32.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Like, how did that transpire?
Do you know where Jellicoe Mountain is in Tennessee? Just north of Knoxville on 75.
Yes.
I'm going up Jellicoe Mountain, an 18-wheeler, and somebody rubber ran the track over the visor. And while I'm going up this mountain, about 15, 20 miles an hour, I reached up and pulled that track down, and I read the whole thing. When I got to the back, I gave my heart to the Lord.
So that was it.
And so when I got to the top of that mountain, I was on the top of that mountain.
Huh.
So
that's crazy.
And what's so funny, the guy that put the rubber band to track was one of the roughest human beings I've ever seen in my whole life. And he got saved, and then he died a few years later. So that's a testimony to him,
He wasn't always putting those up. Something happened in him that made him be motivated to do that.
Absolutely.
And that influenced your...
now...
Isn't that interesting?
So now that's my calling.
Yeah.
I love a track ministry. So...
Yeah.
And it's really... it's been a blessing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I could tell you story after story how God's used me. It's just another life. I could write a book on what he's done. Man, I met the president of Hell's Angels in South Carolina. I met Evel Knievel's mechanic.
Yeah.
They were on a little tour preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
And I met them by accident. And so it's just.
Well, you mentioned Hell's Angels. You got to talk about that. Like, what was it? How did you meet the president of Hell's Angels?
I was sitting in my living room, and I was a Harley rider.
Yeah.
And so my son comes in and says, Dad said, there's a guy down the church, down the street here, jumping cars on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And so as soon as he says that, I jump up.
Yeah.
Well, my youngest daughter, every time I cranked my Harley, she was on the back of it.
Yeah.
So we rode down there. It was winter. It was cold.
Yeah.
We got down. Sure enough, here's this guy in, and he was dressed up like Evel Knievel, and he was jumping these cars out next to Ponset Highway. So, and it was really, really cold. Wind was blowing, and there was a guy on a little podium, and he was, explaining what this guy was doing, jumping, and why they were there,
right.
And but he didn't tell me who he was.
Yeah.
And and my daughter says, Daddy, I don't feel good. Can we go home? And I said, okay. But I was in my heart, I was thinking, I want to listen to this guy. You know? So it ends up the next morning, my daughter was sick.
Yeah.
So my wife said, would you mind taking her to the doctor? We called, and I said, okay, I'll take her. So I take her to the doctor. We're on the way home. We had a Wendy's they just built on Cedar Lane Road. So she said, will you stop and get me something to eat? I said, sure. So we go into Wendy's, and we get our little trays, and we go sit down at the table. And we no more sit down, and these two guys walk in the door. Now, what's the odds of that? And they go to the window. They had a little booth on the window or table, and they go over there. So I just picked the tray up, man, and said, I'm not through. I said, I know, neither am I. So we're going over here and talk to these guys.
Yeah.
So we go over, and I said, you think you can share the gospel with me? I said, man, yeah, sit down, So we sat down. Then I found out one of the guys was, he had a store. He wrote a book, and he sent me the book. I got his name and address. He got mine. He wrote a book about Hell's Angels, but he was the president of Hell's Angels in Charleston, the Charleston chapter. And then the other guy was Evel Knievel's mechanic. He traveled all over the United States with him. So it was just a faith, just a hand of God that brought us to that. So,
sure.
And that's the way my life's been. It's just totally amazing how God has used me, and I'm just thankful that I'm still here, and everybody's got a purpose, and that's why Gracie and, my wife passed away years ago, and so I prayed. I got lonely, and I'd raised a grandson by myself and my mother, and she passed away, so I was by myself, so I started praying. And here comes Gracie.
So talk about that. How did you guys meet? I'll let you start, and then you can fill in the gaps. How did the two of you meet? And you can kind of give anything on the back end of that you want to give, right? What do you?
We met at Myrtle Beach,
okay.
South Carolina.
All right.
August the 9th, 2019.
Okay.
All right. I had went down with my best friend from high school to babysit her cousin's dog.
Okay.
While they went to North Carolina to visit their daughter.
Okay, now where was high school for you?
Oh, Parker High School.
Okay, so here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm born and raised in this area.
Got it. Okay.
Born in Seneca, raised in Greenville. Okay. Live in Liberty now.
Yep.
But anyway, Vicki had been telling me that she had this person she wanted me to meet. But I didn't think too much about it. And, she just kept saying, well, you need to meet Ricky. You need to meet Ricky. Well, come to find out, they were trying to fix him up with all different types of people. He had a lawyer, which is a friend of mine. Yeah. And then the motorcycle woman, I don't know her. And but anyway, what happened is we got down there, and she's about halfway down to Myrtle Beach. She says, oh, by the way, Ricky's going to be there. And I think he's going out to eat with us tonight. So he did. And I was nervous wreck. I mean, I thought, oh, my gosh, I didn't want to be set up, like
right.
that.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, we met, and we had dinner together. He got a call. He had some issues going on over Ocean Lakes where he was staying with his kids and all, and so he had to leave. I never heard from him again, but my Vicki, my best friend, her daughter died of COPD in November, and he come up to that funeral, and I was there, and so we saw each other again, and then we still hadn't talked, though. He still hadn't called me. And so Carol, the cousin I'm talking about, we went to stay with, she would call me and say, well, has Rick called you? Has Ricky called you? Has Rick called you? And I said, no, he hasn't called me yet. I left my business card. I was a nurse. I left my business card with her to give to him, and she did 2 times.
Yep.
He never called.
You were hard to get.
Well, he thought he was.
Yeah,
but
right.
anyway, she says, oh, well, I said, you need to call him. I said, I would not call that man if he was the last man in the free world. I said, I've given him my number twice, and if he wants to call me, he'll call me. And so anyway, she called me one last time. She called me, and she says, has he called you yet? And I said, no. I said, Carol, I just think he's chicken to call me. And so that got word back to him. Well, he doesn't like chicken.
Yeah, right.
He
You called him out.
And so once I called him a chicken, he said, no. So he called me up one day after that. Sure, I don't know when, but sometime in January after that. And said, hey, this is the chicken man. And I thought it was somebody coming to fix some pipes under the house that had leaked. But it turned out to be him. And that's how we got together. That's how we started talking to each other and eventually dating. And then we got married in 20 of, I said, we met in 19 in August, and we got married August the 1st of 20.
Of 20, so a year later. So prior to that, were you married before that?
Yeah, I was. I was divorced. I'd been divorced for quite a while, though. And I was pretty happy down in my little neck of the woods, little hole in the wall with my grandkids. And, and I had adopted them at that time. And he comes along. He adopted them too, but at that time it was just me and the girls. Yeah. And was pretty happy, and but never thought about meeting somebody else and getting married again. Just never really, entertained the idea really.
Until some man ticked you off and stood you up and wouldn't call you back.
Yeah. But it turned out to be good. I mean, we hit it off pretty well. Our families hit it off pretty well. I mean, we all get along pretty good. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with our families. We have grown kids, they have their own lives, and now we're raising 3 little ones and who are trying to have their own lives.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so anyway, that's how we met.
Okay.
And so we've been together now. We've been married, was 4 years in August the 1st.
Right?
Yeah.
4 years now.
So we're going on 5.
And you've had quite a 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh.
It's been just a boring, nothing happening.
Oh, no, nothing to say the least.
Right? No, we started this by saying three girls in the house.
It started off shortly after we were married. He started complaining of abdominal pain.
Okay.
So he goes and gets an ultrasound, and it comes back that he has this lesion in his right middle lobe. And I'm thinking, they call it cancer, and he got worked up, and they thought they were going to take out his middle lobe. And I was thinking, well, I guess I'm going to be his nurse, and, that kind of stuff. And so as it turned out, there never was definitive about actually what he had. They called it cancer. Then it was MAC lung disease, which is all those were curable but incurable at the same time. Work on it. But anyway, during that time, he was getting all these CTs and ultrasounds and stuff. I went to the doctor for a routine checkup with my thrombocytosis, which I'd had for years.
Okay, and what is that exactly?
Thrombocytosis is where you have high platelets. Your platelets start getting high, and so that's a high risk of heart disease or heart attack and stroke and stuff like that. So I was on medication from 2006 up until I've been on it, pretty much up until I got diagnosed with the other. And so I go to the doctor in May, somewhere around in there, of 21. And my platelets were and my labs were just changing. My medicine had quit working.
Right.
And I was on hydroxyurea.
And I know that internally that's what was happening, but what were you feeling? Like, what changed in the way that you felt?
Nothing. I felt fine. I had no idea I was even anywhere near that.
Something else was going on.
Nothing. No. Yeah. I knew I had the thrombocytosis, but the medication had been controlling that.
Right.
And so I took it and run with it.
So symptomatically, you weren't really feeling anything different.
Not at all.
Your tests were showing something else was going on. Okay.
No.
Got it.
Yeah. So my hematologist says, well, I think I'm going to have to send you to an oncologist. And, still it wasn't like, I'm saying, well, okay, we'll just go. So I get over there, and she starts telling me about, you've got myelofibrosis and you've got MDS, and which is MDS is myelodysplastic syndrome, and myelofibrosis, which are both incurable bone marrow cancers.
And you were already a nurse, so did you when they tell you this, you immediately know what they're talking about?
I know. No. Yeah. I never knew about all this stuff. I was an ICU critical care nurse, so cardiovascular nurse, ER nurse, I did all that.
Sure.
But I had no idea of what they were talking about. I just, from the point of stem cells, I only knew that they were delivered for someone that had leukemia and stuff like that. Okay. And I was actually a certified chemo nurse. I could deliver those meds, but I really knew very little about them. Okay. And so once she told me that, she started working me up for a stem cell transplant. I had 5 bone marrow biopsies in 1 year, and she said it was an aggressive disease. And that if I didn't get the stem cell transplant, I probably had less than a year to live. And so I got worked up through all the doctors. I went through a battery of doctors and tests and clearances to be able to have that stem cell transplant.
Okay.
So they worked my son up. He was my donor, and they worked him up, and he donated the stem cells for me. In January, the first week in January of 22, I go in the hospital, and I get 5 days of massive chemo. That's to clean out everything in my bone marrow.
Right.
And total body radiation front to back. I was naked front to back, and had a total body head to toe.
So when you do that, are you laying on something?
You're laying on the floor practically. I mean, I was basically not even foot off the floor in a mold. I had to go and get a whole body mold made, one for the front and one for the back. And so I lay that, and I had my hands down in this little mold.
Yeah.
And then I had to turn over and get it done. It took it was about a 30-minute process. I think it was about 15 minutes on each side. And very dehumanizing. I mean, it was embarrassing because I was in there with nurses and male and female, and it was sort of, it was kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I bet.
But anyway, it's something I had to do, and I get in the, I'm in the hospital getting all this done. He comes down with COVID. And so apparently they said they couldn't keep me there.
Right.
So they reversed what they had done. I'm not sure how they did that. I never really found out. I keep thinking I'm going to ask the doctor, but I never do. Mm-hmm. And sent me home for about 2 weeks. During that time, I became really sick. My hair started falling out in that picture you saw. That was that was about a week or so before I actually went back in the hospital. My hair just started clumping and coming out, and I couldn't brush it. It was just mangled together.
Yeah.
And so one of my high school friends, Kathy Snyder, has a beauty shop, and she took me to her shop and buzzed my hair. Buzzed my head, rather.
Okay.
And the day before, I actually went back in the hospital in February, the first week in February, to actually start over again. Uh-huh. So I go back in the hospital that day after that, was February the 7th, I believe it was, and started over. I had to have that massive chemo again, 5 days of it, but not the total body radiation, so that was over. And so at that point, I was able to continue with the stem cell transplant, and I did all that. And thought it was going to be okay. I mean, I was very sick, to say the least, but I thought it was something I had to go through to get better. And so I did. I never thought about that this wasn't going to work, that I was going to die or anything. I never thought about that. I never worried about it. Actually, what I did is I prayed before I went in. I put my little lapel on my nursing lapel. When I was working, I had a little, what is that little button thing you put on your,
Sure.
You
like
put
a lapel pin.
Lapel pin,
right,
yeah.
Thanks.
And I pinned that to my Bible, and I went in and I said, I'm going to have the faith of mustard seed to get through this. So I took that mustard seed. It's still on my Bible to this day. And but still, that got me through. I mean, I never worried that I was going to die, that it was going to fail or anything. And so I got to come home after a month. The kids had to leave. They couldn't stay with me for 100 days. I was in quarantine, I guess, because of the infection. I had no immune system, barely any blood. I was getting blood transfusions about every other day in the hospital. And but I did get to come home. And so about, that was in, probably I had it in February, March. Sometime in March, around toward the end of March, I got to come home. And sometime in April, at the end of April, I started with a graft versus host disease.
Okay.
Which is basically saying my son's stem cells didn't like my body.
Wasn't working. So I went back to my appointment in May the 17th, and that's when Dr. Chowdhury sat down and told me, she said, Gracie, she said, I'm so sorry, but she said this transplant has failed. And she said, you felt, there was a 70-30 chance, 70% it would work and 30% it would fail. And she said, you fell into the 30%. And I just sit there and listen to her. He's sitting over there recording it. We had no tape. But it was like, I was just numb. I didn't feel anything. I wasn't afraid or anything. So was that a way of her telling you, like, we've exhausted the possibilities here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because she did tell me, she said, there's no further treatment. No further treatment. She said, because of my age, I was 70 at the time, she said it would be too risky. As I actually went through that with no organ failure, which was amazing to her.
Yeah.
And to me too, because I knew what multi-system organ failure was. As I had patients with that, so I knew what it was. I knew what it did to you. And they had even told me that it could kill me. This whole process could kill me. So I was just fortunate, but I never worried about it. And so after it failed, I just went through about 3 months of, I guess I'm just going to have to die. I don't know what else to do, but I didn't feel that way. It was kind of weird.
So some part of you knew.
Some part of me knew.
Yeah. So there was outwardly, were you kind of preparing? Like, were you trying to, like, have the conversations with people and connect, or what were you doing? So some part of you knew, like, this is...
I just we never talked about it. You can ask Ricky. We never talked about me dying.
No.
The only problem I had was I was so weak. I could not get to the bathroom without just stopping and holding on to something.
Right.
He put up safety bars in there.
Yeah, just to get you from one place to another.
So I could get up and down, and
Yeah.
it was very, very hard. I would come out of the shower naked. And I'd put a towel around me, and I couldn't even get my clothes on. I'd have to go soaking wet with a towel to the
you were
bed.
pretty depleted.
I was very depleted.
Nothing left in the tank.
And so it was a horrible time, but still, I never thought about dying.
Yeah.
Never. And
so I'm just curious about that. What were you thinking about during that time? Were you just like moment to moment, or were you
pretty much moment to moment?
Were you actively trying to be positive or trying to have a positive outlook, or were you just kind of, where were you going with your mind?
I think I was trying to be positive, but really I think I was just floating through. It's like, I don't know if I was positive or negative. I can tell you one thing. I became like a tyrant.
It was a piece of uncertainty.
Right.
We had a peace about it.
So
but yet I still had doubts in my mind. She did too.
Yeah.
But I think we both just accepted what will come, and we prayed about it, and we said, Lord, it's up to you. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2001, gave 4 years to live, and here I am.
Yeah.
So
and and we didn't talk about that, but you guys went through that. Yours didn't go through all the chemo and all the processes that she went through, but you had a diagnosis that was...
Well, I went through a radiation treatment.
Okay.
Experimental. But I think that helped too. Yeah. Just knowing that, that there was hope.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about. We talked about hope.
Yeah.
Big word in our home.
So you were having that conversation on purpose. Like the word hope was definitely something you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did pray. I asked the Lord, to do, you have to ask for His will.
Sure.
That's the main thing.
Right, yeah.
And I could cry over it too, but it was like I was just there.
Yeah.
I got to the point to where my pain was so bad in my back, I couldn't breathe. I had no energy. I couldn't walk to the sink. I couldn't do anything. And the doctor told me, she said, it'll take you 2 to 2.5 years to get your energy back. If you ever do, like you had before.
If the transplant worked.
If the transplant worked, and then it failed.
Yeah.
And so, I was just a miserable person.
So she kind of set the expectation that the transplant didn't work, and she'd already told you that if it worked, it would take that time to get back to some place and then now you're sort of in this limbo.
Right? And she gave me at that point, when she told me it failed, that I had 6 to 12 months maybe to live, and the leukemia would come back. And that's the one thing I can say about the chemo and the radiation. It did irradiate the chemo, and it has not come back.
Okay, so
but the MDS and the myelofibrosis is still there, as far as I know. Yeah. And she will not do a bone marrow biopsy on me to see because I'm doing too good. And she said until I start showing signs of digressing that she will not do one. Yeah. She don't need to. But anyway, 3 months after it failed, like I said, was in limbo. One of my high school friend, Kathy, the one that buzzed my hair.
Okay, but one moment. Okay. Just for context, what year was this? This
22.
was 22.
All of this happened in 22.
Okay, this was 20. I just wanted to make sure because, we're about to 25
I got
here
diagnosed in 21 and went through the battery and then 22.
Okay.
January,
got
February.
Okay.
Okay. In May of 22 is when I found out it failed. In August of 22, Kathy, the one that buzzed my hair, my friend from high school, found out that it failed. And we had been going to our Parker High School monthly get-together for years at the Northgate Soda Shop, downtown Greenville on Main Street. And we met over there every first Tuesday. And so I hadn't been able to go for a whole year. They, ever since December, I think December of 21 was my last time there. And then she heard through whoever that it failed, and she was using these patches. Okay. The patches come in.
Did you know she was using the patches, or she was just doing it and you weren't aware and this was just going on with her?
Never had heard of them. Okay. And so she calls me up and she says, Gracie, I can't believe this. She said, I heard that your stem cell transplant failed. And she said, I'm using these things. It's supposed to rebuild your stem cells. And she says, I don't know if they'll help you or not, but she said, it's worth a try. And she said, you need to talk to Rick. She said, these things might help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, okay. I said, I'll talk to him. So we talked about it, even talked to my doctor about it. And she said, oh, no, it's a scam. Don't do that and all this. You're wasting your money.
Didn't fit the convention, right? Yeah.
No. And so I says, well, Dr. Chowdhury, I said, you've given me a death sentence. I at least want to try.
Yeah.
And I said, just let me do it. I gave her a sheet of all and I showed her all the things patches I was using or was going to use. I didn't have them yet. And she says, well, I'll follow you on it. But she says, I can tell you, she wasn't interested at all.
No, right. She was not a believer.
No, she's beginning to be
that way. Quite skeptic.
Yeah. But I understand that.
Well, it wasn't her training and it wasn't the tool in her tool bag.
It's like she says, I'm in a middle of the road here.
Yeah, right.
And I have to stick within my scope of practice. And that was true for me, too.
Sure.
And I had a scope of practice, too, I couldn't step out of.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't be the doctor.
Yeah. But
so
your friend could come in and say, maybe you ought to give this a try.
Maybe you ought to give this a try.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. I said, let me talk to Ricky. And we talked about it, and he said, well, if you want to. So she told me to call April Vaughn, who we adore and very thankful for. But she got up with me over at Kathy's shop, I believe it was. And she started, when she found out all the stuff that I'd been through, what I had, she said, oh, Gracie, she said, you've got to try these. You need them on yesterday.
Yeah.
And so she told me what I needed to use, the patches that she suggested I use, and we ordered them, and we got them I guess by the time this all happened, probably about the end of September,
about third week, I think.
Third week, yeah. And so we started using them, and about the first 3 or 4 weeks, I told him I wasn't feeling any better at all. I mean, literally, nothing changed. I mean, I was so disappointed. I was more disappointed in that than I was the failed stem cell transplant because it was my last hope. And so I said, I think we just need to, I don't think this is working. I said,
wasting money.
Wasting money is what I told him. And he said, no, Gracie, he said, April told you that for every 10 years you've been alive on this earth, you need to commit to that many months.
Yeah.
And stick to it.
Yeah.
And not a day here and a week here, but stick to it every day.
Yep.
And so I said, well, if that's what you want to do, I was at the point of I just didn't care. I just did it.
Yeah.
And so about the end of October, I guess, I just all of a sudden, I can't put a finger on when it happened or what day it happened, but all of a sudden I had energy like to die for. I was breathing.
Yeah.
I could breathe. I had no back pain.
Yeah.
I wasn't the tyrant. He can tell you, everyone hated to see me coming at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because I had gotten to the point of I couldn't take anything more.
You were
I
just cranky and
I
who
was
wouldn't
hurting.
be, right?
Yeah.
The kids and I would head for cover about 4 o'clock.
And I knew it, and I
set your
hated
watch
it
by
so
it.
bad because I love them. These are my children, but I was so cranky with them. I couldn't stand anything.
And it's interesting because you just talked about you weren't aware. The chemistry inside you had changed. Yeah. Your former wife was like, you invented road rage.
Yeah.
Right. Who is this guy? You're not doing that today.
Yeah.
Right. But in the same way, like things had changed inside of you that had a big time influence.
Right.
By the way, which is also would tell you that these patches were then having an influence. Right.
They were.
Yeah. They were changing the chemistry in a way.
They were changing. Right? And by the first week in November, I was out Christmas shopping, going to Commerce, walking around all the shops down there. Yeah. I was going out to eat with family again, just able to do whatever I wanted to.
Yeah.
I cooked Thanksgiving dinner. We put up a Christmas tree. We decorated. We went shopping. We did all of these things that I normally did. My life was back.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it. All I can tell you is I attribute it to the Lord, prayer.
And why do you attribute that to God? Like, explain
Because I
that to
trust
me
him.
a little bit.
I trust him.
Okay.
I believe in him. I believe
And
his word.
it's a path.
It's a path. Yeah. I mean, I love the Lord with all my heart,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like my daddy said. He had a dissecting aortic aneurysm. It was 10 centimeters. We thought he was having a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
Got him to the hospital, and the doctor leaned over. And if I had done this at home before he went, I would have known.
Yeah.
But he leaned over and he put the stethoscope on his belly,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, he's got an aneurysm.
Mm.
And so he got the surgeon down there. They prepped him and they whipped him into surgery as fast as they could.
Mm-hmm.
And we all gathered around his bed that day. The doctors and nurses, everyone there in ER at St. Francis came in and prayed for him.
Mm.
And Daddy said, don't worry about me. He said, I'm coming back. He says, I'm going home. He said, either I'm coming back to our home or I'm going to my other home.
Mm-hmm.
He said, either way, I'm going home.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of rationalized all that.
Yeah.
That's how I dealt with it.
Yeah.
And so as time went by, I mean, I kept getting better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
I keep telling my doctor, I'm getting better. Oh, you just have a lot of faith, Gracie. I said, yes, I do. But I said, I also believe this is something the Lord put in my path, and I had the good sense to use it.
Yeah.
And that's when in December of that year we went, because we were going once a month, and she was doing labs. And I asked Dr. Chattery, because in the back of my mind I'm thinking, well, she's supposed to be dying,
Mm-hmm.
and how long is she going to last, in the back of my mind.
Nothing.
Right.
Yeah. And so I asked Dr. Chowdhury, I said, where are we supposed to be, at this time? And, the stem cells failed and, we're doing patches. But I said, where normally would a person be? She said, by now, massive chemo, blood transfusions, or dead by now.
That was in December of 22, the very
Right.
end.
Yeah.
December of 22.
And
you
that
weren't
picture
doing
where I'm
any of
holding
that.
my hand
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
that was Christmas of December of 20. That was Christmas Day,
Mm.
December 22.
Yep.
I've been this way ever since. I mean, I've been to Florida, Orlando. We drove down there. We flew to Dallas. We're fixing to go to Anaheim, to seminars and give testimonials.
Related to the patches.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so let's talk about the patches themselves. Okay. What are they? Because they have a name, and I am aware a little bit, but talk about what they are and how.
Okay.
You found them through your friend, but then
Right.
what is this stuff?
Well, it's basically phototherapy, photobiomodulation therapy. It all means the same thing. What you do is you got a little patch over there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
This little patch, can you see it? You
Got it.
Okay, hold it up here. That little patch
Mm-hmm.
looks like a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Looks like a Band-Aid.
Right.
But it's more than that, a lot more than that. When you peel this thing off,
Mm-hmm.
you can see it here. I don't have to peel it off, but if you do
Right.
peel it off, you see that little
So it's got a
cloth in
little
there.
thing in the middle
It's
of
a
it.
fiber.
Yeah.
It's a little fiber of cloth.
Okay.
Similar. And it has organic water, sugar, crystals, amino acids,
Mm-hmm.
all in there. And each patch has it has the same thing, but
Yeah.
it has different amounts.
Okay.
And so what you do is you take this patch and you put it on your skin.
Okay. And are there certain places where you're supposed to put them?
Originally, yes. They have different pressure points, and he can tell you about that too. But
Sure.
This one here, you can put anywhere on your body they're finding, and
Okay.
it works
Okay.
anywhere.
Okay.
But what happens is initially they said to wear it on the back on that bony prominence back there, or
Yeah.
on the 1 inch below the navel.
Okay.
And so I've always worn mine here.
Yeah.
But when you put that patch on your skin, I got this one here to show you.
Yeah, and you've
but-
got one right here too.
Yeah, I've got this one right here. When
Yep.
you put this patch on your skin,
Mm-hmm.
it automatically goes to work. And what happens is it uses the infrared light of your body that you can't see without night vision glasses, but you could if you had those.
Okay.
And that heat activates and causes a molecular change in this thing, and it starts like a little circular rhythm in there.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does, it produces a frequency of light back into the skin
Okay.
that activates different peptides, proteins, and stuff that causes your body to heal itself or has the ability to heal itself.
Okay.
All right. This patch right here, the X39, activates the GHK copper peptide.
Peptides, okay.
Which actually produces your stem cells.
So the patches are essentially influencing your body to produce its own stem cells.
Patches don't do anything; they just cause the activation.
And of course, in the last 15 years, there's been tons of research and efforts put into stem cell research and stem cell use, and wherever that source is coming from, and that's what they were trying to do with the processes that you were going through, was trying to do a stem cell process.
Yeah, right? What it does is when you turn 30 years old, you lose 50% functionality of your stem cells. Mm-hmm. They don't die; they just go dormant. Okay,
and by the way, what is a stem cell? Like, why do we call them stem cells?
Well,
what is the difference?
I'd have to think about that, but you are a stem cell.
Yeah.
You started with one stem cell.
Okay.
And so, as the Lord has it, your body as a fetus and a baby coming on in the womb develops all these stem cells. They divide, they multiply, they go here, there, and yonder.
Creates different parts and different organs.
And the Lord directs those stem cells.
Sure.
And He still does.
Mm-hmm.
And so these stem cells become a liver, a heart, a kidney, and so on. And what happens with this is, the way this functions is the dormant stem cells, it builds new stem cells on top of those dormant stem cells, and those dormant stem cells wake up and start marching.
They start going to work.
Like they were 20 years old again.
Like they used to once upon a time.
When you were 20.
And when they do, they're going to the place of need, essentially.
That's exactly right.
Like a sort of layman's way to say it is they're designed to know where the need is.
Yeah, the brain tells them where to go.
Right, okay.
So the brain goes to the highest order of need you have in your body.
Yeah.
So if you're taking them for maybe, say, like your wrist hurts and you got a little arthritis, you may not feel that right away, a relief from that, because it might, if you don't, it's probably working on something else,
which could potentially be the source of why you're having
exactly. And but eventually that pain will go away. So then, once these stem cells are activated, it activates and regenerates over 4,000 plus genes in 24 hours. Can you believe that? And it actually causes better sleep, age reversal. We just had a bio study done on our bio age.
For your metabolic age?
We did that 100 test through NEAT. I don't know if you know NEAT or not, but anyway, our naturopathic.
Yeah.
And he's 10 years younger.
Yeah.
And I'm 11 years younger.
Yeah.
The difference in him is he's 79. He's now 69.
You're 69.
Biologically.
Yeah.
A year and a half ago, I had it done.
Yeah.
And I was 107 years old. Because I was super sick.
Right.
And
at the age of 73.
At the age of 73.
You were 107.
107,
now 74.
Now, this test I just had done, I'm down 11 years to 96.
Yeah.
And this just keeps on and on.
Oh, you went from
107.
So you're making your way back to
I'm
74.
making my way back. And that's the whole point of these patches is age reversal, healing, and stuff like that. I want to give credit to Albert Einstein a little bit.
Okay.
Of course, he's gone on now, but he did say, he was a fantastic scientist and developer and whatever. But he said the future medication it's been 1950 or so, the future medication would be medication of frequencies. That's what we have.
Yeah.
The only difference in our frequency treatment is that you can go to the hospital and you can get blue light therapy, red light therapy, you can get ultrasounds, all of it's sound, frequencies, light, and all of that therapies. But you got to have a machine to do it with. This is the only technology in the world, on the planet, that uses your body as its power source.
Right.
So you don't need all that.
And it's promoting your body's self-healing properties, right?
It is.
Self-sustaining properties.
And getting the medical field to understand that is hard, but it is coming around.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had an electrophysiologist actually used them on himself and then his patients. And he actually was going to the American Heart Association in November, I think 18th, I think it was, to present these patches to the American Heart Association.
Okay, so
I'm not sure of any results of that yet.
You don't know yet, but how did this technology come to the world? Like, who did it come through? Because it's using what was already there, but if somebody figured out a way to use the body's ability, right? So who was that person?
Is it okay if I let Ricky do that? I'll tell you his name. David Schmidt, awesome guy, but I'm going to let, he really is into David Schmidt.
Okay. Talk about David Schmidt.
Because I got a mechanical mind, I think I pick up a little more. But anyway, David Schmidt, he worked for the Department of Defense.
Okay.
And he also did a lot of work for Special Ops.
Okay.
And since he had a team, and they developed a lot of things that David is coming out with. And
so what kinds of things was he working on?
Hydrogen generator.
Okay.
That runs off of water.
Right.
And they already have it.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it's just not commercial yet.
Yeah.
And when you think about, what do you think about cars?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think there's a lot coming out in the near future. But David had been so successful that they asked him. The Navy SEALs were using these mini subs, these nuclear subs, on long missions, and they were having a problem staying awake and alert. And I think they were about 3 men in a sub, from what I understand. And but they were using, barbiturates, drugs, or whatever, uppers to keep, and it was, hindering the function. So it ends up, they asked him to find something that was would not go in your body, affect you chemically, And so he worked on this thing. It took him 7 years to develop his first patch, and it was called Energy Enhancer. And it worked. And about that time is when 9/11 came along, and so they defunded him.
Okay.
And
so those patches are not being used today then, is that what you're saying?
So what happened was he decided to go out on his own. He said, because he's a great humanitarian, and he says, I can help a lot of people with this. And 9/11 was really a blessing, because I don't know what would have happened. The patches, I guess, would have stayed in the Department of Defense, and we'd have never heard of them. In fact, he has guys that did podcasts with him that were SEALs that were using these things, so they already verified, that they were out there. But anyway, so when David, he came back to Atlanta, and he couldn't. He was struggling. He joined a team of guys like I guess they were just like scientists, amateur scientists, and it was, I forgot what the exact words he used, but anyway, he was giving a little seminar, and one of the guys that was there was a wealthy person, and so he approached him about the seminar on these patches. And he said, do you mind if I send a doctor over to interview you to see if you would, if these things are really real, because they sound so interesting, So he said, no. So he sends this guy over. And so we interviewed him for about 6 hours. And so he calls this guy and tells him, look, I want to go back tomorrow. I want to talk to him some more. So he went back the next day. And so he ends up calling the guy that has the money and says, look, this guy's got something. He said, you need to invest in this.
Better get involved.
So that's really, in essence, what happened. So, but the doctor, he wrote a little theme about these patches, and he had a friend in California. Well, he had several doctor friends, so he was sending them out and asking their opinion, And one of the doctors is in California, and one of the doctors knew Richard Quick, which was the swim coach for Stanford University women's team.
Okay.
So they asked David if they could use some of the patches on the women, and they were in the pre-Olympic trials at that time. So he said, sure. So he sent them patches. Guess what? 5 out of the 6 women set their very best time the first time they put those patches on. So they go to the Olympic trials, and they're just, kicking the swimmers' rear ends, So the Olympics, some of these guys saw these patches on these girls and they hollered dope, they're doping. So David ends up having to go, before the Olympic committee and explain to them that this is not dope. There's nothing going into your body, nothing that affects, no chemical. So they sent these patches off to somewhere in California to, I forgot what the college was, but they examined. They said, no, there's nothing going into these people.
Right.
So it cleared him of that. So that was actually the beginning of it.
And it gave him a case study in a way too, right?
So he won. I think the first year he made $17 million the first year, but he struggled on because they had a logistics problem, just like anyone else. And so he had some rough years, but he stuck with it, and it worked out. And
to the point where
he does. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no, you say it because I'm going
to. You asked that those patches were not in use anymore, but they are.
He took that and moved it into.
These were the very first patches he invented, and
so that's what was the predecessor for the X39 patch. Okay, I get it. Okay, so idea, had experience, started figuring out in a military. A lot of technology moves its way through the military, right? NASA, the military, and then through the experience or the event of 9/11, then he ended up going out and doing his thing. Went through the process that anyone who has a great idea goes through, the struggle, right, to the point where, but. Let's talk about now, because you guys just got back from Dallas, and that was the convention of people who are involved in this 20 years later.
Yep.
6,000.
How many? 6,000 people. And the people that are there are representatives. They're selling these, and they probably some people that work with him directly, like are on his team.
His CEO of LifeWave, he's the owner, inventor.
LifeWave, by the way, is the name.
He's got a president and all the,
he's got a team,
people,
and he's in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's just kind of list off, what's changing in people's lives. What are some things that these patches are helping people go from one thing to another? What are they eliminating? What are they? Because I know from our conversations, you can't say it's a cure.
Yeah.
Right. From a
medical standpoint,
legal standpoint, FDA, you can't say cure, but what's happening? What's changing in people, right? What's going on?
I'll start with April, and then he can chime in too, because he knows something too. April Vaughn, the one that told me what to use.
Yeah.
She had been treated for over 20 years with lupus and Lyme disease, which turned out not to be that. It turned out to be rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay.
She got so bad, she had frozen shoulders. Her hands were crippling up. She could hardly put her keys in the car. She had to do like this to get the key in. Couldn't dress herself, couldn't do her housework. Just very pitiful person. Hair was coming out. She was just sick, was gaining weight because of all the stuff that she was on for that. And so she finally made an appointment with a rheumatoid arthritis doctor. So. And she's over on Roper Mountain Road in Greenville, and I can't think of her name, but she's over there. And so she goes over there, and she tells her, you've got rheumatoid arthritis so bad your C-reactive protein is off the charts, and we've got to get you in the hospital and get this down, or you're going to have a stroke or a heart attack. There's no cure for this. You'll be in a wheelchair by the end of the year. It just kind of bummed her out.
The prognosis wasn't good.
So she says, well, I can't go in the hospital right now. I've got to go home, talk to my family. I've got to digest a little bit of this. Well, April had been a health and wellness trainer for 20 years or so. And
because of her children.
Yeah, because of her children, who has phagocytosis, which is an inherited blood disorder that caused them to be raised in Greenville Memorial's Children's Hospital, or Prisma now. And so she had a client that was having some kidney issues and some problems with her knees, like arthritis type problems. So she had called her and asked her what she could do, if there was anything she could do to help that. So April had no idea about these patches. So she got on the internet and she started looking up kidney cleanse, things you can help the kidney with. And so she happened to run across this this article about, try this is what you can do, put these patches here and here and here. But she didn't really think about it being anything, that would really help her. But she sent it to her because she said, just, she wanted to just send her something. So she sent it to her, and she said, do whatever this says.
Yeah.
And see what happens. Well, the girl did. And about 3 weeks later, she calls April up the very day that she came out of the rheumatologist's office and got all this bad news, and told her, just bouncy, bubbly, said, hey, April, I just want to thank you for these patches you told me to take. She said, what patches? She said, I don't know anything about a patch. She said, well, you're the one that told me to do them. She says, but I don't know what you're talking about. And she says, well, I don't know, but they're helping me. My kidneys are better. My knees are better. She said, I just feel great. And she says, well, that's good. She said, I just got the worst news in my life. I've got rheumatoid, and I'm going to be in a wheelchair in 6 months, by the end of the year. And she said, I got to go in the hospital and get the C-reactive protein down. And she says, April, I'll give you 3 of what I've got if you'll come and get them. And she says, I just don't think a patch is going to help me at all. And so the lady just kept insisting that she try these patches. So, of course, she meets her over at Westgate Mall in Spartanburg and gets 3 X39, 3 Eon, and 3 Alavita. So she goes home, and she says, being the health and wellness person she is, she says, well, I'm not putting these on my body till I research it. So she picked up the X39, pulled it up, and started reading about it.
And there's plenty out there. People can look it up.
Yeah. And so then she put on the Eon, and when she found out that she looked at Eon, and she says, oh, my gosh, she says, this can reduce my C-reactive protein. And the doctor just
exactly
said.
what they said, right?
Yeah. And so she says, okay, so she put. The first day, that night, she put on the Alavita back in the back of her neck, and she said within 2 days, she started the X39 and Eon the very next day, because you have to wear them in the morning to night. Yep. And so she said within 2 days, she could do her shoulders like this. She said, Gracie, it was the first place I started noticing a difference was in her shoulders. And she said she could barely move them, but she could move them where she hadn't been.
Yeah. Something was changing.
She calls this girl back. And she says, where did you get these things? I need some more. I want more. So the girl told her who she got them from, and April calls her, and the rest was history. Within 4 months, after being on these patches every day, consistently, her rheumatoid arthritis was disappearing. By the end of the year, she was in Costa Rica on a cruise with LifeWave. And she's traveled. I mean, it's been that way for her ever since.
And so, we're talking about you were given a death sentence.
And she was too.
And she was essentially because, again, you got it. This is, and we want you in the hospital right now. They were going to treat her symptoms. They weren't going to take away that. And now she's living a whole other life than one that was the sort of prognosis she was given, the same way with you. And you've just come back from 6,000 people being together, and we're talking about thousands of people. And those are the ones who made the trip.
Right.
Because there were plenty of people who wanted to make the trip. They just didn't make the trip.
Yeah. And
they all have a story, or they have a story of a story, right?
Yeah,
everyone. They have everyone. So like let's just do a list. Like what are some of the things that people are getting that are changing? What are from what to what?
Okay, the spectrum diseases are changing.
Okay.
We have one brand partner whose son had autism. He's 26 years old. Well, he might be 27 by now, but he was 26.
Yeah.
When you give him a pencil and piece of paper to color or draw, he would do like this, like a baby, just all over the page.
26 years old.
26 years old. He couldn't hardly put his words
verbalize
together.
And right.
Yeah. Within, I don't know how long it was after he started wearing the patches, but she posted, I guess 6 months or so ago, he had a picture of an animal, and it's posted on, you can see it on
he's
YouTube
drawing
and stuff.
as someone you would expect.
What he's doing is he's drawing within the lines, but he's not color coordinated yet.
Right.
So that animal, I think it was a lion or a tiger, is all different colors in there. But it's within the lines. That's a big.
Yeah,
huge,
and that's an indication of probably other things that are changing in the things. Okay, so spectrum disorders.
Okay. Then heart problems.
Okay.
We have a doctor that's a chiropractor, Don Harmon, wrote a book. He's got several books out now. He went to the doctor because his heart was having flutters, skipping beats. And so they diagnosed him with atrial fib and said there's no cure for it. We can only treat it and slow it down, and that kind of stuff. And so anyway, he also found out he had a right bundle branch heart block, which there's no cure for. And it's one of the bad ones to have a heart attack. It's kind of like will take you out.
It was kind of a time bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had started on the patches. I don't remember how he got started. His testimony's on YouTube, Dr. Don Harmon. But he started the patches, and a few weeks later, maybe a couple of months or so, he goes back to his cardiologist. They run more EKGs and stuff. There's nothing
there.
He's got a sinus rhythm and no bundle branch. And the cardiologist, just blown away. He says, this is impossible.
Yeah.
He said, no, it's not impossible.
Yeah.
He said, you see it. It's on that paper. You see it.
Yeah. So we're talking,
like
we're talking. So let's just quickly. So cancer, inflammation, cognitive issues.
Right. Exactly.
Heart issues.
Cardiac
issues. Kidney. So
all the organs.
Hormones,
right?
Yeah.
Hormones. Yep. Anatomic nervous system slows down. So ADHD. And those kinds of diseases. It's just so many things. Knees, cartilages growing back.
So really, the concept here, in the most simple sense, is these things have a way of helping your body function more like it was designed to function.
Right, exactly.
And that means consistent normal functions, but also repair of things that are off.
Right.
They're not working well, or they've been damaged, or there's something going on.
Once it repairs, it don't go back either. That's the beauty of it.
Okay, so like what you're experiencing is, and your doctor won't test you because she doesn't want it. Yeah.
And that's okay with me. As long as I feel good, I'm fine.
Okay, so what about blood issues? I mean, it seems like if anybody...
know about... I'm having a little problem. I don't know of anyone as far as blood. I know I can tell you this. My daughter has COPD really bad, and she has had exacerbation of COPD several times, put in the hospital on a BiPAP. That's the next step to a ventilator. And she escaped them both times. And we started her on the patches a year and a half or so ago. And she has not been in the hospital one time since then with exacerbation of COPD. She still has COPD. She went to her lung doctor about 3 weeks ago, and he told her that her COPD had not progressed in over a year. Her x-rays are still the same. So there is a study out in PubMed that the GHK copper peptide, which is what the X39 activates, is actually reversing the gene signature for COPD and colon cancer. So those studies are studies only. It's not been, I don't think it's been proven, or the doctors are not coming out and saying, hey, you need to get this GHK copper peptide in you somehow, some way. But it's working, and it's worked for her. That's the only explanation I have for her.
Yeah.
So COPD, lung issues, MAC lung disease, which he got diagnosed with. I have another friend who has idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis.
Okay.
She has had no major issues with that. In fact, she
how
can't
long
even.
has she been using those patches?
It'd be a year in February, a year. And she was just within weeks. She was coughing so bad when we went over to tell her about the patches, and they were ordering. She was going through Kleenex after Kleenex after she'd cough and she couldn't talk, just phlegm and all this.
Yeah.
Well, she hasn't had that. In fact, you have to do a sputum sample for idiopathic.
So now...
no, hers was MAC lung disease. I'm sorry. The idiopathic, another one, MAC lung disease.
Yeah.
But no problem. She is doing great. She couldn't go to church.
Well, I was going to say, she's not getting out of the house.
She
now
wasn't.
She's going to church, going out for meals,
going out to eat and
hanging out, able to have a conversation.
It was so embarrassing.
The idiopathic, I'm sorry about that, but the idiopathic person is a nurse friend of mine, and she has neuropathy in her feet from all the stuff going on with her too. She started on the patches. She actually uses the Ice Wave, which is our pain patch, and the X39, and Eon, and she is doing great. She has a doctor too. Her husband's a doctor, and he laughs at her about it, but she's better.
Well, I think, look, I haven't tried them. Mm-hmm. When I first met you, I was getting ready for another process, mm-hmm. which has resulted in better health for mm-hmm. me. And I didn't want to do them simultaneously because mm-hmm. I wanted to be sure what was helping. Mm-hmm. It wasn't because I doubted that they would be helpful. And so I will definitely try them for myself. But I think that I can see you. I can see these pictures, which we'll share as we, broadcast this. But I can see the difference. I can see the life that you're living. And what 79 and 74-year-old have three teenage girls running around like teenagers themselves, and having come back from the experiences that you've had, right? You've got, you're on getting ready for decade number 8, right? Mm-hmm. You've got 7 decades of life behind you but what we will do is make sure as this goes out that people can connect with you because look, I'm not here to make some claim about something I haven't personally experienced, but I know this. There is a way for people to be well, right? There is not the way, there is a way, and this is working. Like thousands of people are working. People can go and look up David Schmidt. They can look up, they can see his stuff and they can see his explanation if they need all the details, if they want to hear more testimonials. People can see it. We want to make sure people can connect with you so that they have, you can be a source for them to get it. Look, full disclosure, this is like a multi-level marketing business model. We're not doing this to promote that as a model. It's just the way that these are being made available. But that doesn't mean that somebody needs to think though, I got to jump into this business or anything. I would just say, look, it's like where you were. What do you got to lose, right? I mean, you're at a place where the doctor says, I'm sorry, there was a 30% chance that this wasn't going to do anything. And that's the lottery ticket you drew, right? And what do you got? I got nothing for you. What do you expect? Well, there's some stuff we could do, but that's just going to hit the symptoms. That's not going to do anything. Yeah. And here you are, getting it closer. You're getting to 3 years post that with sustained health and a lifestyle that is livable, dropping your metabolic age. So there's some real numbers behind what's changed in your life and yours as well. You and I, we didn't really go there, but you and I have also talked about how kind of from an emotional standpoint and everything that we talked about, the experiences that this has been helpful for you and PTSD. Some of that, helping. So there's something here. And my encouragement to people and why I wanted to film this is look, I know I did a health thing because I needed it. Something needed to change. And I'm so glad that it did. And I'm living a different life than I was. And if there's something and someone can listen to this and this would be the way that they connect to this. My encouragement is, hey, what do you got to lose? Give it a shot. And one thing that's clear is you don't think you're going to throw a patch on and feel better the next day. This is a process. It's working with your body's processes. It takes some time to start to manifest in ways that you notice. You wake up one day and all of a sudden you got energy that you didn't have. You raise your shoulders. You're not spitting in a Kleenex, you're going out to dinner, but I think that what I would love this to be is a message of hope for people who feel no hope currently, right?
Exactly.
I think that's the real message here, right?
That is the real message.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
and there's other things I would encourage anyone. These patches are good for anyone. Even they've never been tested yet on anyone under 18.
Okay.
But we've used them on our children, and we've got people that's used them on their babies because there's nothing goes in the body.
Yeah.
Nothing at all, and except frequencies of light,
and you can use them on your animals.
You can. You can use.
I had a lab that was 16 years old, about 15 when his hips started going bad, and so I started patching him after hours is 12 on, 12 off. So when I'd take him off at night, I'd put him on him.
Yeah.
And within a matter of a couple of weeks, he was back chasing frisbees like.
Nice.
Yeah, we
Yep.
videoed
Just
him.
amazing. I mean, it's not amazing to us, but it is if you tell somebody. It's,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
it takes a little, like this takes a little bit to sort of, you got to kind of
You have
onboard
to
this. You
digest
got to
it.
digest
Yeah.
it. It's going against convention. It's
Right.
going against what we've sort of been enculturated into and what we've all been taught. And you know, it's also the thing of, look, have your own story then. If you got nothing to lose and you're aware enough to know that you're feeling hopeless, why not give it a while?
Right.
Why not do something and commit to it long enough? I mean, like, okay, what do you think is the minimum commitment that someone should make just to go, hey, I'm going to give this a shot?
Okay.
Like, how long is a minimum amount of time someone
1 month
A
for
month.
every 10 years you've been alive.
Oh,
So
okay,
if
yeah.
you're 50, 5 months. If
5
you're
months.
30, 3 months.
Okay.
Most people don't stop there. They keep
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
because of the benefits
Well,
of
why
it.
would you, right? If it's,
Right.
yeah.
And
like, you know what Richard Quick said?
mhm.
He says, you know, if you could back up 20 years and see how medicine was then,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now why can't we have something now, you know, 20 years ahead?
Yeah.
And he said this is 20 years ahead of everything.
Yeah.
And because it was proof to him.
He's got a water machine coming out,
Yes.
and it's going to infuse light into your body.
Nice.
And he's got a supplement that goes along with that you can purchase. And when you put it in the water, it goes to, it's designed for specific organs to help them heal
Yeah.
faster, a lot faster.
Yeah, he continues to press into the research of this and
Right.
seeing other ways to use what really was kind of revealed to him and what,
Right.
yeah, and find new applications.
And not only
yeah.
that, this guy, I just want to put this in there.
Mhm.
He's a Christian. He
Yeah.
loves the Lord with all his heart.
Yeah,
And he just knows there's a better way.
Mhm.
He discovered that with the energy enhancer.
Mhm.
And the other things he was doing. And he knows he's humanitarian. He wants to help people.
Yeah.
That's his goal.
yeah,
And he's come out with this water, but he's developed this water through studying ocean life like lobsters and Bible codes. That's what he's doing.
yeah,
And they're kind of jiving.
Yeah.
What is it? The musical, the tones, the tone bars, you know, all
yeah.
that stuff.
yeah,
I mean, it's amazing what he does. I wish I could even be a tenth of as smart as
yeah,
he is.
yeah. Well, and I'm thankful for people who are willing to go against convention, and also when they let that come through them and stick with it.
Yeah.
For the benefit of people and a lot of people and more people. And well, I know there's a lot more we could say. I appreciate
gosh.
it, and
Yeah.
you know, there's a reason for us to be enthused and thankful for this. And I'm just glad we had the opportunity to share this, and we'll just let it
Me
go
too,
where
and I
it needs to
appreciate
go to who it needs to go to, right?
Amen.
Thank
All
you.
right.
We prayed about it.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.